Welcome to Romera Records virtual cast. Today we have on Doug. How's it going, Doug?
I'm good. How are you, Jackson?
I'm doing well. So, yeah, as usual, I've had a lot of people on from Podmatch, so that's why I got you from, and just interested in what you do. So, if you could go ahead and get into like who you are, what you do, and how you got started.
Yeah, sure. Happy to do that. And again, thank you for inviting me to be here. Basically, I am an executive coach and a business advisor, and my main focus is helping business owners who have been running their business for a bit, but they feel stuck. They've kind of hit a certain level of success, but they can't figure out how to get past that level on to another level. And I I kind of got attracted to this many years ago in my early career. I was a banker and I watched companies. Some companies successfully kept growing, 2x, 3x, on and on and on. But other companies could maybe hit that first 2x or second 2x, but then they'd get stuck and the owners would be frustrated and couldn't seem to get past it. And sadly, a lot of those businesses ended up failing before they did anything else. That bothered me because I never like to see anybody fail at anything. And so I wanted to figure out how we could, why that was happening and how we could fix it. Fast forward, I left banking and became a consultant and was helping clients, but I realized there was really a kind of a deep human side in those business leaders and needs they had to figure out who else they needed to be able to be for their teams and their companies. So that kind of drove me to the whole idea of what it meant to be a coach. And I did the study for that, but I bring a lot of that business background and able to work on the nuts and bolts. But I also help the owners work on their own mindset and attitude and approach about how they're leading their effort.
Now, I've always seen people who are coaches and everything have kind of like a certain strategy that it seems like they have found that works for at least the clientele that they end up working with. Is there a certain type of strategy or like step process that you have that you take these business owners through and you're like, all right, step one, we're going to look at this and then go from here?
Yeah. For me, when I'm doing the personal side, dealing with the owner themselves about where their headspace is and what they're thinking, what they believe in, etc., we really work on in the early steps. I call it, what kind of leader do you want to be? Do you have any idea of what you think you need to be to move on to the next level? And usually, our early several sessions together, we're working on that definition first. It kind of follows the classic Stephen R. Covey recommendation: begin with the end in mind. If you can describe where you want to go, we can figure out much faster and quicker, effective ways to get there. So we do that work first, and I ask them to think about, number one, where does your current attitude and mindset about your beliefs and values and how you manage people, where did that come from? How did you learn that? Did it evolve? Did you work for somebody that you hated and you said, I'm going to do 180 degrees opposite of that? I don't want to I don't want to do that guy. And all of those are good answers. So it's understanding where some of these thoughts came from can also set the foundation for moving ahead and building a bigger personal vision of who you want to be.
Yeah, I do think that a lot of business owners they do kind of have a like a tunnel vision for when it comes to where they want their company to go. And things change over time, right? Like people are changing, marketing is changing, how to scale is changing. And if you're a business owner and you're working on your business, some of those outside factors kind of dissipate over time because you're not really thinking about those things. You're just thinking about like my product. So if you make shoes, then that's what you're thinking about. How can I make these shoes better? How can I get more shoes out? But you're not really thinking about like, what kind of shoes people actually wanted to have shoes changed over time and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it can be difficult for a business owner to kind of realize those outside factors. And so for a coach like you to come in and help and kind of give them that like audit of like, hey, this is what you did when you started 5 years ago, but things are different now. So you kind of have to look at a different way to do things.
Right. I do agree with you with the definition of the problem being kind of, and it starts to look like a tunnel vision. And I think I tend to look at it more of the owner getting too deep in the weeds on the day to day of what's going on. And I was speaking with someone just yesterday, and we were talking about the idea that if you own a business and you've never taken a minute to ask yourself, what do I routinely do every day? If I map out everything I touch, everything I do, who I talk to, why I do it, etc., you're going to find a lot of repetition in there. I'm always doing this, I'm always doing that. And sometimes if it's directly tied to the delivery of your product or service, you have no business being at that level of repeat. You need to find somebody else on your team that can do those things so that you can create a repeatable, reliable, and scalable solution on how you're going to run things. But if I can add to the tunnel vision idea, there's one other alternative to that. There's also the risk that the owner is this chronic visionary, always got new ideas, and they're wearing out their team with, let's go here, let's go there, let's do this, let's do that. And you never get a direct path to success. You're always pinging around, changing things, tweaking things. And it's one thing if you're in fashion, maybe, you're manufacturing apparel. Yes, you've got to have new styles, new varieties, new colors, everything. That's great. But if you're in more of a tangible good and service that the market is looking for consistent delivery of the same quality, you can't have your team pinging around on this idea and that idea and back and forth.
Yeah, I think we have seen instances of companies, whether it be food or other products, where they try to reinvent the wheel. Like they try to, like even I would use McDonald's as a perfect example because McDonald's is iconic for their cheeseburger and their fries, but
Right.
we've seen them um, try to change things, not so much with the burger itself, but like they've tried to do things with like pizza. I think they had like the McPizza and they've had like they've added salads. They try to add like a lot of health foods and they've also done like I think they might have done like a taco in the past. Like they've
Yeah,
tried so many different things when it's really like, hey, what are people coming there for? Like if you really think about it, a company like McDonald's could really turn into like a Five Guys where they're just serving burgers and fries and like a couple other items, but that's it because that's what the majority of people come there for. I would say a lot of kids get like the chicken nuggets, but like people go to McDonald's for burgers and fries. And
yeah,
so they could really just eliminate all that extra work that they're doing on those extra items and just focus on one thing. But I guess they realize or they think it's worth it to try all these different products. But people want that same quality. They want that
they
same
do.
cheeseburger.
They do. And you're right. When the original brothers created McDonald's, it was just a factory of burgers and fries. And, Ray Kroc showed up and wanted to sell them a milkshake machine. And one of the brothers said, no, we don't do milkshakes. That's not who we are, and it was a really big struggle, but and there's a great movie about that whole story if you haven't seen it. But anyway, you're right. Getting that vision of what you really want to represent And that helps define your brand. It tells the market who you are and what you're going to be doing. And for the entrepreneur that's trying to build some sort of enterprise around his idea, his or her idea, you you have to discipline yourself to have certain habits that allow the business to move forward. And back to the basic dilemma that I described, the owner who's hit a certain level of success but seems to have plateaued. Inevitably, one of the first indicators of that stagnation is that they are unwilling to add anybody to the leadership team in the company. They don't want a chief operating officer or a general manager or a president type title to come in and share the role that they've got. And now that's the entrepreneur that's probably not going to be successful making that shift. But the ones that are successful will look around and say, I brought this baby up to this point, but I got them through high school, but I don't think I can teach them college courses. I'm going to go hire a college professor to run my company, if that makes sense. And I have interviewed entrepreneurs on my own show that said just that. I had one guy, he and two partners started a restaurant chain in California. And one of the most brilliant things they all did as a team, they went out and hired a CEO.
Mm,
They didn't make him a fourth partner. I mean, they did give him a little bit of equity, build opportunity, but not an equal fourth partner. But they found a guy who knew how to run large scale restaurant chains, and they built the thing up to $100 million company and were able to sell it off when the time came. But they knew, they were smart enough to know, among the three of them, each of them had a really strong skill that was good for the early restaurant, but it was never going to take them to the multi-million-dollar level. So they went out and found a guy that could do that for them.
mm. Yeah, and that's good evaluation on their point. They are evaluating and being honest on where they believe they were and what they and where they think that they could go in their business, because sometimes um people they think that they're better than what they are. Like, I think a lot of people might be optimistic on where they are in their business. And so they're like, we'll be fine. We can do this. All we got to do is make this one change, and we'll be fine. And then other people might be a little too pessimistic. They'll think like, oh, we're doing horrible. And they don't realize how good they're actually doing. And then you have those people who were kind of in the middle. Like, they knew they were optimistic. They knew they could do better, but they also knew that they needed help to
Right.
get to that better. So yeah, being able to just do that kind of internal audit of, hey, like, we know we can do better, but we need somebody else who can really help us get to that point. That's um, very diligent of them to actually do that for themselves.
Right. And it's easy to quickly identify good old fashioned, one of the seven deadly sins is pride and ego, right? And that enters the game for a lot of entrepreneurs, and it's a delicate balance. To be a good entrepreneur, you've got to have a certain level of risk tolerance. You're going to take more chances than the other guy,
Mm,
and that often is paired with a pretty strong sense of self and ego, almost to the point of being a little obnoxious at times. But when I run into one of those kind of owners where it's pretty obvious that they kind of wear their ego out on their sleeve, and they have built a pretty darn good business, but they're stuck. What I kind of delicately try to get them to do is refocus that sense of ego into the bigger gain and success of the business. It's not about you, it's about the business, but it's your business. So, you know, unbolt from that personal sense of pride and cast the pride over on the business itself, and then ask the question, all right, what are we going to need to do to keep this thing growing and building? And usually they kind of go, oh yeah, you're right, really, okay, yeah, I could be a lot more proud of a $20 million business than I am of a $3 million business.
Yeah, and I'm curious on your take on this working with different business owners and stuff. But me as a manager of a music artist, I'll talk to them about like publishing. So publishing is a sector of music to where you can collect royalties based off of how much traction, how much your music is being played and stuff like that. And what a lot of big name artists do is they sell their publishing. I think recently, um, I think Bruce Springsteen like sold a lot of his publishing for like some astronomical number. It was like 300 million or like something like that. And so basically what he did was he gave up his ownership of his music for a lump sum of money. And I think in the music world nowadays, a lot of people are on social media saying like, own your publishing, like own all this stuff that you're making. But ironically, if you're willing to put your ego aside and say, hey, maybe owning this isn't the best thing. Maybe I need to give this away to somebody who could do more with it, and then I can make money off of it. So whether that be if you own 100% of your music, like maybe give up 50% or more to a company, and then they can make you more money because owning 100% of nothing is way less lucrative than owning 20% of a lot. And I think a lot of music artists have an issue with understanding that. But are you seeing that with business owners where they're having a hard time kind of giving up that little ownership or giving up the even the responsibilities, like even with the employees, like maybe the CEO might have a hard time giving up responsibilities because they're like, no, I do it better, I know how to do this.
Yeah. Yeah, that you're spot on. That is the big challenge, and interestingly, it that same dynamic even fits in the corporate world where people are climbing up the management chain in larger companies where they don't really own the business, but they own some work stream, or I should say they're responsible for some work stream. But when it comes to delegating tasks to a team to spread the load and accomplish more, they tend to hold back and say, well, Joe or Sally aren't going to do it as well as I can, so I'm going to just plow through this. And then, but if you really press them, they say, I'm overwhelmed. I'm working 60 hours a week, and I don't get a breath. I haven't seen my kids in a year, whatever, and it's crazy. So again, it's kind of one of those things, and it definitely holds true in the entrepreneurial world. And I love how you said it, owning 20% of something really big is way better than owning 100% of nothing. And it can be a simple math question, to run the numbers and see what that looks like. But it's a hard decision for people to make, no doubt.
I think it's mainly just because a lot of people just value saying that they own something and or that they have the ability to control something. I guess that's a better way of saying it because
Mhm.
either way you own a portion, but I think a lot of people like the ability to say and do whatever they want with what they have. And so I think that's why a lot of people struggle with that as far as like business wise is they think, oh, if I give up a certain percentage, then I might not get my way. Like if the venture capitalists want to go this way and I don't, then I'm not going to get my say so anymore. But that's kind of the hit and the sacrifice you have to make to be able to make a little bit more capital and make a little bit more money for yourself is giving up those little bit of freedoms. But it's I think it would have to just depend on who that person is and what their, as you said, what's your end goal. If like if you don't have your end goal in mind, then you're not going to be sure of
Right.
what you even the moves that you even need to be making.
Right. And there for that independent business owner who's still on the early side of everything we're talking about here, there is a near-term alternative to everything we've been talking about. And before you have to spread the ownership or hire a new CEO, the shorter term alternative is to organize an advisory board for your business. Bring in some outsiders who you believe you can trust, but importantly, they can't just be beer drinking buddies. They need to be credible business experts or leaders who have experience. They've done deals multiple times, and they can come in and look at your business plan, look at your strategies, look at your ideas about where you're going and how you're doing it. And you can have that dialogue about, no, that may not be the best way. What if you did X? What if you went over here? And you can have that discussion. You can take advantage of that insight and possibly bust through that invisible wall that's holding you back.
Yeah, and I do think that a lot of people once they have that kind of team, things will start to make sense. But as you said, you kind of have to just break down that wall at first. You have to kind of make the realization first. And once you've done that, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this makes sense. Like these people have a better outside of the box look on what we're doing instead of me just trying to like figure it out. They really get an outer look. So about those teams, have you ever had somebody like you as a coach? You're helping people. Have you ever had somebody like, hey, you're pretty good at this. You want to help us permanently?
Yeah, I've sat on several of those advisory boards over time. And even for that advisory board member, if the company does, in fact, continue a growth trajectory, at some point they're going to get maxed out, and the board needs to be upgraded as well. So there's definitely those stair steps in the growth curve that you want to try to achieve. And it it really does. Having that outside advisory help can really create some disciplines around monitoring your financials, making decisions, sticking to a plan or sticking to a budget, and helping move the business forward that way. And that also is a little bit of a security blanket against that owner that's the wild-haired visionary, ping, 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 let's do this, let's do that. If they're willing to allow that board to influence what's going on, they can kind of be throttled back. The board can say, actually, that's a great idea, but not now. We're going to put that in a parking lot, and we're going to hold on to it. We're going to keep track of it, and we're going to, nurse it a little bit, and maybe go nurture the idea offline without bringing the team into the situation. But um, again, that advisory board can help provide that sort of wisdom and experience.
Yeah. Is there also like any companies that you've worked with where you've seen some holes in their business and it seemed like they were unable to really target it? So I'm not really asking for like some failure stories, but like just it just seems like they couldn't figure out that one thing. Even though you're trying to help them with it, they weren't able to really pinpoint it and get that gear turning in that one sector.
Yeah, totally. And the way I've come to do that, and this is kind of the other half, remember when you asked me who I was and what I did, I said I'm a coach and a business advisor, and that's an interesting combination that doesn't always happen. The business advisor part, what I've done, again, I've leveraged a lot of both my schooling, as a business major, MBA, blah blah blah, but the banking experience also. I've encapsulated that, and What I've done is created a kind of an assessment model or a blueprint that I follow. Every business has four basic pillars that need to be worked on and need to be improved consistently. First is the people. You know, who are you bringing? What do they do? How are they being managed, led, and coached themselves for success? And then there is the process. How are you doing what you're doing? Do you have systems defined? Do you have things automated when you can automate them? Do you have repeatable systems that are reliable? Then thirdly, there's the product itself. You know, what are you doing? What's your service? Or if you're manufacturing, delivering a tangible item, what is that thing and how is the market responding to it? Are you paying attention to market indicators that says, yeah, your thing's not so cool anymore, you know? And you know, we you got to be sensitive to that as well. And lastly, the fourth pillar is performance. That's where you've got to look at the numbers. You have to have not just your financial numbers, but you want to implement a system of key performance indicators that tell you you're tracking in the right direction. And people get kind of balled up with the KPI idea. It's overwhelming for the average entrepreneur, and they somehow go to the extreme and say every employee in my company needs a KPI. Well, no, they don't. But if you've got a small work team, yes, that team should have a KPI that you can track and monitor and work toward that progressive growth with them. So those four areas, you know, people, process, product, and performance. If you spend time analyzing each of those areas, and I've got long checklists in each of those areas that I use when I go in and work with a business owner, we'll do kind of an audit of how you're doing in each of those areas. Then we'll prioritize what seems to be the most sensitive and most critical things to be working on first and create that roadmap of where we're going for the near term and the longer term.
Do you see a trend with certain business owners as far as things that they tend to always do well or always do bad at? Any kind of trend you see amongst those like two things?
Well, great question, and I, my my immediate answer is it's hard to declare it a trend. There are some patterns though that pop up, and they don't always occur at the same time with the same owner. It's different depending on the owner. For instance, it's not uncommon to find owners that are amazing salespeople. They're the rainmaker. They can go, you know, sell popsicles to Eskimos, as the old saying goes. You know, they're great at it, but they couldn't define a process, and even their sales process is not streamlined and documented. They're just out there wheeling and dealing. They love meeting the public. They love talking the game. They love, you know, that win of having somebody say yes. And if that's the entrepreneur owner, there are going to be a lot of difficulties in house with the way things operate, the way things get done, the way they fulfill that pile of orders they just got. You know, if you can't successfully fulfill your orders, you're not going to be around very long because you want those customers speaking well of what they got from you, and you want them coming back.
Mhm.
So if the point being, if they're extreme one way or the other, the flip side of that is I've seen owners that are great at the idea, they're great at product design or solution design, but they can't sell anything. They can't represent their own business. They can't tell their own story. I actually had one owner one time, it was a technology based company, and he said, I won't talk to customers. I said, what? And he said, I'm not a people person. I'm a coder. I know what I can do. And I'm like, well, how do you think you're going to get any business in this door? Well, I'm going to need somebody else that's going to do that for me. Okay, that's a reasonable answer, but for the size of your company right now, that's not the only answer. You're going to have to figure out how to engage these people because they want to know the big dog. If and you're asking people to spend literally millions of dollars for technology solutions, they're going to want to know the head guy. They're going to want to know the company owner that they're dealing with. And if you're not good at that, you're going to keep churning the pot of who you do accidentally get on board. And and that is exactly what happened.
Yeah, people who have that mindset just need to get a job because
Yeah,
then they don't have to worry about all those other things. They just do the thing and then they're done.
that's
But
right.
it can be difficult though because I could see that person's point of view. The fact that they know they have a great idea, they know they have a great product, but you would need a company that's going to do exactly what you want to do. And honestly, that's me. Like I, I don't mind talking to people, but like salesy, I am not a salesperson. And I have a media company and we like create content for businesses and stuff like that. And I don't like having to sell my service. Like I don't like having to go out and tell people how good I am at what I do and all that kind of stuff, but it has to be done. And if you
Yeah,
want
it
to
does.
survive, if you want to even thrive in your sector, then you need to do that thing, or else, as I said, you just need a job. If you think you're good at camera work and you want to start a company, but you don't want to talk to anybody, then go get a job.
Right. Right. Or, go find a partner that can see your vision and is willing to come alongside it and do and fill that gap and balance out what is necessary to make the company be a success.
Yeah,
And then again, we're back to the, well, okay, you won't own 100% of it if you have a legitimate partner come in. But again, that could be okay because 100% of nothing is still nothing.
that is correct. So what are some other things as far as like expectations that people have when they bring you on to help their business thrive? I'm sure some people might have some outlandish expectations of like, oh, we brought Doug in and now we're about to make 10x the first month. Like what are some different expectations that people might have?
Well, fortunately, I don't know that I've ever had anybody that was over the top with their expectation. But your point is valid. People sometimes think, okay, I'm going out, I'm hiring a professional business coach or business advisor, and that's going to solve everything. Well, no, it's not. Not necessarily, because you can do the work with the advisor, and if you don't agree with the gaps and the pressure points and the problems that get identified, you just want to kind of gloss over them. Like, here's one that comes up a lot with the smaller entrepreneur. When they start out, they hire somebody to come on the team to help them out, and this person works like crazy, is committed, dedicated, would run through fire for the owner, and the company starts to grow, and that person all of a sudden doesn't have the ability or capacity to fulfill an important job that's needed at the new bigger company. But the owner says, oh, I can't let them go. I can't. They were so loyal to me. I have to honor that. I have to find something. I have to do something. And they force them into positions that, if you just could look at the boxes on the org chart, they're important positions for the continued success of the company, but this person's not capable of doing that job. And it creates a real stumbling block. And I get the personal emotional aspect of something like that, that feeling of, I've got to let George or Sally go because they've hit their max capacity and I just don't have anything now that fits their ability. Um, that's many times the first tripping point. And then if I'm the advisor sitting there going, it's not going to get any better until you fix that, then all of a sudden I'm the one that gets out the door because we don't have that long term. that long-term loyalty.
Yeah, you kind of have to be on the same page, and as we have many times referenced already, just having that vision of what are we doing in the future that
Right.
really guides everything, like from the day to day stuff to the quarterly to the yearly. That end goal vision is what kind of molds your habits, and once you get those habits in order, that's what will really help each individual in the company fulfill their role and fulfill the things that they need to do to get better. Have what so also what are the sizes of the companies that you've worked with?
Typically, it starts at about 5 million in topside revenue. They've been able to either by good intent or just hard work, they built the company up to that level. But now they're wanting to go beyond that. Somewhere between 5 and 10 million is usually the starting point, and they typically have to have 10 employees or more. I have had prospects that have come to me. They've only got 4 guys, and they've made $3 million a year, and they're rocking and rolling. But that's still a little bit of a garage band kind of deal. It's not the kind of company that I can really help go to another level.
So what really got you to that point? Like what made you think, oh, like this is my sweet spot of company as far as like the revenue as well as the employees, the number of employees.
Well, it goes back largely to my experience 20 years in banking, watching businesses come and go. And when I started sort of doing my own informal study of what were the parameters, what were the characteristics, and where did they hit the wall, it was usually in that $5 to $7 million range that they were doing fine until they got there. And then uh, it became problematic to try to bust through or level up from there.
That's really interesting, and I'm glad I asked that question because I would have never thought about that. You formed your business model off of where you knew the problem was and not so much people who could have a problem, if that makes
Yeah,
sense. Like
yeah,
if you have a company could have 50 employees, but like only make, 500,000 a year or something like that.
yeah.
You knew that people who were making a certain amount of money with a certain amount of employees ran into this issue like, yep, I'm just going to wait, and boom, they're going to run into that issue around that point. So that's pretty interesting. I've never heard anybody really form their business model off of
Yeah,
the
it,
data.
it, it was hard data. And like I said at the start, I, from early in my own life, I started gravitating to the servant leader mindset. And everything I've ever had a chance to do when I've been asked to lead a team or lead an organization, I do it with that servant mindset. And for me, what that means is I want everybody to succeed. I want the employees to succeed. I want stakeholders to succeed. And I certainly want our customers to succeed. So when you try to make that happen, or at least for me, the way it shows up, I hurt when I see somebody failing at their work or at the job. I want to help figure out what can be done differently. Is it the person's training? Is it the process? Is it the environment around them that's not working? What is it that is, it can be repaired or adjusted? And like I said, in my banking experience, when I saw these companies come and go, and they would bank with us for 2, 3, 4 years, and they're on this click, 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 they're on this climb, and all right, we got a winner here that George is doing great with his business, and then all of a sudden we start seeing financial reports that are starting to get bumpy, and you go, what's going on with George? What's happened? And you try to have meetings with them, and they'll tell you 1,000 reasons the company stalled, and customers changed, or I lost a customer, I lost a deal, just thousands of reasons. But it took me many years to start really connecting the dots and saying, No, it's not really about the market. It's not really about the product. It's the owner's mindset that inevitably was the chief contributor to either the success of busting through the wall and moving on, or pausing, stalling, and possibly even failing at that point.
Do you think that there are people who have a hard time grasping your concepts? Like when you come in and you're giving them advice, you're giving them kind of roles to take on now. Do you feel like they sometimes struggle to get your vision for their company?
Yeah, and this is kind of where coaching and consulting sort of collide. You know, the consultant comes in and just goes through the checklist and the audit, like my blueprint I described, and says, "Well, here's your score. You got a gap here, you got a problem there. This thing over here is good, that's strong, blah blah blah," and you lay out that data, so to speak, and the client can either take it or leave it. They can go, okay, this is interesting. I'm glad I know this now. I think I know what I can do, and they'll move on with it, or they'll reject it. They'll say, well, you didn't understand that. You didn't see that right, and I've got a reason that this is that way. Blah blah blah. Well, the coach comes in and says, okay, you reject that idea, fine, what are you going to do about it? What do you really, if that's the position you want to take, fine, but what does that mean to your longer term success? So, it, and still, to your question, at the end of the day, yes, I've had clients that ultimately say, if this is the only thing you've got for me, I'm not interested. I'm done, and I go, fine, let's part as friends. It's not that we're right or wrong. It's just, we think differently about this, and let's just agree that that's what it is, and we'll move on. So,
Have you ever monitored what happened with those companies after that? Like
oh
people,
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. And the general pattern, as best I can tell it, they might have some small incremental level of continuing growth, but it's never really what they could have had. And every once in a while, I will be told by a colleague or friend or somebody somewhere that, hey, didn't you do some consulting for that one company over there? Yeah, well, guess what? They've blown it out. They're just rocking and rolling. And I usually find out they came back to one of the ideas we had talked about and went ahead and implemented it. And it's like, okay, I'm cool. Again, in spirit, if they found their success, that I'm happy for them. Good for you.
yeah, and even I could see it being a challenge for you to be detached from those kind of things because obviously you find it important and you have a love for it, being as in you have a business model on it, and so you might feel very emotionally attached to making sure that people end up doing a good job. I know I've worked with people before and it'll like upset me when they do bad. Comes like, I wanted you guys to do well, so why aren't you doing the right thing? So yeah, I could see it even being an emotional attachment for you trying to make sure and like, these guys they just had to do this and they'd be okay.
Yeah. Well, and on that point, that's where I have to take my own medicine. And we've talked a little bit about owner ego. Well, I could easily have my own ego looking at the successful engagements I've had. But again, I try to really cautiously watch that, and I want to be emotionally engaged with everybody for their success. But if it does or doesn't happen, that doesn't change my needle on what I think about what I'm doing.
Yeah, and the better that you can do that, I think the kind of better decisions, even for the opposite, for the business owner working with
Right.
you, the
Right.
more emotionally detached that they can be from their business when they're listening to you, the better it will be off, because like a business, like if you're the owner, that business is your child, it's your baby.
Right.
And imagine having an outside parent come in and trying to tell you how to parent your child. It's like, okay, I hear what you're saying, but this is my child, you
Yeah.
can tell me what
Yeah.
to do. So I
Yeah.
can see how that could be very difficult.
Yeah.
Is there some issues that you have found with your model, like things that you have found um trying to help people out? You're like, oh, maybe I should change this up because this isn't really working for the people I've been doing.
Wow, that's a really great question. The thing that comes to mind is because my four pillar model is so comprehensive, I do have to be careful for kind of overwhelming the owner. I have to try to gauge and judge how deep they want to dive on on this process, and I have to try to find a little bit of a sweet spot of their tolerance for really digging in and as others say, peel the onion, and how far can we go into the root of your business. Um, and that's not so much about changing the model, but it's just adjusting for the situation.
Yeah, I mean, how do you like do you look at numbers, or like and you kind of have to do like a psychological approach to that as well, as far as like looking at the person and kind
Hmm.
of figuring out like how far or how deep can I really help these people? Like how much do I need to really prod into what they want me to do? Like, if do they just want me to make that revenue number go up? Like, do they want me to make sure their profits are actually going up even if the revenue goes down, maybe their liabilities go down? But I guess you just kind of have to do that to figure out how much you actually need to do.
Right. Well, and depending on the situation, I will try to encourage my clients to take a personality assessment right at the start so that we can get a little bit of a level set. I can get some insights into how they think about the business and the world around them, and kind of how they show up to others, because there's an interesting call it a premise that I learned, um, and it goes like this: we all each have our own sense of identity. When we're looking in the mirror, it's the story we tell ourselves about who and what we are. And but then what happens is we walk out the door and we carry that identity into the world, and what we say, do, and act on creates our reputation among the people around us. And so the same is true for the people that work for you in your company. The things you say, act, and do creates your reputation as the owner and the leader. And if you're not willing to compare what you can gather about the reputation, and you got to do that through feedback from the group, if you can't balance that against your identity, you may have a disconnect. You may be going back home and looking at the mirror, putting on your pajamas and say, yeah, I'm cool. I'm good. I don't know why people don't like me. I don't know why they don't do what I ask them to. Well, how are you talking to them about doing what you want them to do? How are you monitoring that? How are you helping them? How are you showing them? And, all of that comes to play. And so, if we can get a quick level set on what that person's sense of identity may be, that also, a lot of the great assessments that are out there now also will show you what alter ego might show up when you get under pressure or you get stressed. The pretty common thread among most psychologists is we go through the world with one kind of personality, but when we get stressed, something else shows up. There's another person that shows up in the moment. And being able to, as a leader, being able to know what that might be or who that might be, you can do more to self regulate you can say, well, I feel it getting tense. I don't want to be, you know, I don't want to be that guy. I want to stay true to my values. So I'm going to look at this differently. And all of that comes into play in helping owners and leaders do more with where they are.
Um, so what is something that you could say you have really helped somebody with or a company with as far as like just a good story that you're like, hey, I was really proud of what I did with this company, of this person to help them get to where they are now.
Yeah. One of the I'm involved now with a national group that is helping want to be entrepreneurs buy companies rather than do a startup. Just go to the market and take a look at buying an existing business. And there's kind of a perfect storm out in the world right now. There's this huge number of baby boomers that are wanting to exit their businesses to retire. And depending on who you talk to, 30 million businesses or $6 trillion of wealth are at risk. And this group I'm working with has seized on that. They've put a structure together to help this want to be entrepreneur be very, very successful in the process. And part of what I'm doing is leading an integration group. So there are people that are helping them on the front end identify, negotiate, and close on the business, but I pick them up at the point of closing and go in and help them through the first 4 to 6 months of the transition of stepping in as the new owner. And we have a whole business plan on how to do that and what to do with it. And what I see happening on a regular basis is these folks, the typical avatar of this buyer candidate is like 35 to 45, somewhere in that age range. They've been in corporate for 15, 20 years. They've decided there's not a good future for me there, and I want to control more of my own destiny. I have a little bit of wealth I can invest, and I want to go do this. So the challenge in that is, in most cases, they've never run a business before. So they're really at square one. We have to do a lot of work with fundamental business 101 and kind of that four pillar assessment. But we set that up sort of proactively. Well, let's look at this business, and now you can kind of start from scratch with your own idea about where you want to take it. And often, interestingly, back to my other points, these businesses, although they are successful and they are in that $5 to $7 million range, they have stagnated because the owner's been slogging away for 20 years and doesn't really want to change anything, doesn't really want to try anything new. They're tired. They're ready to retire and move on. And so it's real fertile ground for coming in with fresh eyes and fresh energy to do something more with the business.
Yeah, and I've been seeing these people online who are these business acquisition type people, and I just keep kicking myself for not really jumping on that train, which I'm 31, and as you said, you're the main people who are like 35 to 45. And as we said, it's the perfect storm of people who are retiring. I think it's also that age group of 35 to 45 are mature enough on how to run that same business, but also young enough to be able to connect with new technology, new ways to implement the business. Like I'm in the South, I'm in Memphis, and there's like lots of companies and stuff that don't keep up with the times as far as technology or just like ways that they can market themselves on like social media, the internet, stuff like that. And I think it's that age group, like people who are maybe my age or older to that 45 level, who have the ability and the energy to even want to take over these companies and kind of
Right.
scale them and upgrade them to the now times.
Right. No, you're absolutely right, and that's a lot of the common features we see is that and a lot of the work I'm doing with this group is predominantly focused on the home services sector, so electricians, plumbers, heating and air, those kind of companies. And when you think about those companies, no disrespect meant, but I call it chucking a truck. There's a really sort of specific mindset. It's not bad. It's just specific that they think about the business. Well, I just need to get the call, and I'm going to show up, and we're going to do the work. Well, you're not going to grow a business with that strategy. You've got to think about social media. You've got to think about a website. You got to think about customer engagement and in customer experience and how they're going to work through that. And customers now are used to being able to hop on a phone and I'm going to schedule my plumber. Boom, there is there an app for that? And yes, there should be. So, in these service companies, when they're in a certain market, if they can get kind of a membership program going with homeowners, then there's a regular service call, there's a repeat maintenance, there's a routine that is available there, and you become their go-to service provider, and it can make for a very lucrative long-term business.
Yeah, and I think that we will definitely see a shift or an upgrade of a lot of companies who have been the routine company in local areas and stuff like that, and they're definitely going to get some new ways to do business and to help their customers get ease of access to a lot of things. And even I've seen in like major corporations, I'll go to a certain place. I'm like, how do they not have, this simple feature? Like, how can I not just schedule somebody? And the worst for me, I was in the Air Force and I have to deal with VA stuff. And I'm just like, VA, you have the government behind you. How do you not have this simple way for me to do something? But
Right.
it will come over time, just people, the right individuals getting involved. So it's almost time to wrap up, but I do want to pick on your background right now, the airplanes and all this stuff. Are you big into aeronautical stuff or?
Well, I'm a private pilot, and both of those little models represent aircraft that I've flown routinely. One's the low wing is a Piper, and the other's a Cessna, and those are both single engine planes that I tend to fly if I get a chance. Yeah, so it's a hobby.
Okay. Yeah, I actually I have a friend who he's a pilot in the Navy right now, and he keeps hounding me to get my pilot's license. I'm like, eventually, like I'll get it. I really want to, but that's really cool. Have you been able to fly much?
Truthfully, not lately. I've been so busy on other things, and it was a sheer hobby for me. When I first got my license about 25 years ago, I was thinking, well, this could fit my. This is when I was still in the consulting world. I thought, well, I'll just fly to my jobs. That'll be cool. I can do my own thing, and well, a number of things happened in my business, and it just wasn't feasible to think about doing it that way. And uh, so I just sort of dialed it back and accepted it as a hobby, and take the kids out every once in a while, and go somewhere. There's a joke among us private pilots. We go out on a Saturday for what we call the $100 hamburger. You get in a plane and fly 100 miles to land somewhere, go get a hamburger, and then get back in the plane and come home. Well, you do the math on what your hamburger costs you,
Absolutely. I mean, but you're just
but it's fun. It's
yeah,
fun.
that's the whole point of flying is just the travel, right? It's
Yep. Yep.
Well, it was great having you on. It was great talking about the ways that you were able to help companies and the struggles and pitfalls that people might have and how you're able to dig them out of it and give people advice on how they can scale their business and earn some more revenue. So thank you so much for coming on and talking about that. But if you
You
could
bet.
go ahead and tell people how they can reach out to you and find some info about what you do.
Yeah, the quickest and best way is hop over to my own website, and it's simply Doug Thorpe. That's THORPE.com, DougThorpe.com. You'll have all the information you want about my various programs that we've talked about here and some of the background and references and testimonials. In addition, I want to plug my own podcast. It's called Leadership Powered by Common Sense. A little sign over here. There, I'll get my hands going in the right direction. Anyway, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. It's audio and video. Audio's on all streaming channels and video on YouTube. Same channel. Leadership Powered by Common Sense.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you for coming on and sharing that. And I hope our listeners were able to get some good content out of that and realize what you are able to do for people and how you get that done.
Well, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.